Hello there, my dear listener. Find a cozy spot, pull your blanket up to your chin, and let your eyelids grow heavy as we drift far away, to a time when sleep was a luxury and mud was more familiar than a warm bed. Tell me, can you imagine falling asleep every night with the scent of rotting corpses mixed with wet earth under your nose? Can you picture waking up to rats nibbling at your feet, or sharing your meager breakfast with a battalion of lice? Welcome to the trenches of the First World War, a labyrinth of mud, misery, and melancholy that stretched for hundreds of miles across Europe. Let's slip into your heavy wool uniform. It's damp, stiff, and smells of sweat, mildew, and something you can't quite identify, maybe fear itself. You try to move, but every joint protests. Your socks are soaked, your boots squelch with each hesitant step. Close your eyes for a moment and listen. The distant rhythmic thud of artillery shells echoes across the fields, mingled with the sharp whine of rats scurrying for scraps. The trenches were not quiet places of contemplation. No, they were grotesque theaters where men played the role of both spectator and victim. Each trench was a narrow gash in the earth, sometimes only shoulder-width wide, its walls reinforced with rotting wooden planks and sandbags that sagged like overfilled pillows. The mud clung to everything, your skin, your food, your letters from home. Soldiers called it the mud that eats men, because once it swallowed your foot, it wouldn't let go. And oh, the mud was not just water and dirt. It was a cocktail of sewage, blood, and decomposing flesh. When rain fell, which it often did, as though the heavens themselves were weeping, the trenches became brown rivers. You might even find yourself standing ankle-deep in what looked like chocolate pudding, but smelled more like an open grave.
Then there were the trench rats. These were not the polite little rodents of fairy tales. They were as big as cats, plump from feasting on the corpses that lay half-buried or forgotten in corners. The soldiers swore the rats grew bolder every day, sometimes nibbling at the faces of the dead, and even crawling over sleeping men. Can you hear the squeak of their tiny feet now, shuffling over your blanket? Food, if you could call it that, was another daily insult. Imagine a tin of McConaughey stew, a cold, greasy sludge of fatty meat and limp vegetables, or hardtack, a biscuit so tough you might consider using it as a building brick rather than a meal. Soldiers often joked that it could break your teeth before it filled your belly. And yet, despite the hunger, there was no shortage of cigarettes. Tobacco became a lifeline, a thin thread of comfort between the coughing fits and the clouds of poison gas that sometimes drifted over the parapet. The smell of burning tobacco mixed with the stench of decay, creating a scent so unique it could almost be considered a perfume of despair. Disease was a silent soldier in the trenches. Trenchfoot, that ghastly condition where feet turned gray, swelled, and sometimes rotted away, was as feared as any bullet. Lice multiplied in the seams of uniforms, laying eggs and causing endless itching. Soldiers burned the seams of their shirts with candles, hoping to kill the invaders, but the lice always returned, a relentless army impossible to defeat. At night, the cold crept in like a sly fox. Blankets and coats were never enough, and you could feel the shivers all the way down to your bones. Sleep, when it came, was fragile, haunted by dreams of shellfire and phantom bayonets. In this gloomy orchestra of mud, hunger, rats, and lice, Each soldier clung to tiny tokens of home, a letter from a mother, a photograph of a sweetheart, or a scrap of poetry scribbled during a rare moment of calm. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? The softness of your pillow tonight feels like the lap of an angel compared to the rat-infested, flooded trench floor.
You feel a drip on your forehead. It might be rain, or it might be something more sinister trickling from the trench wall above you. You open your eyes, and for a moment you can't remember where you are. Then the smell hits you, that mixture of wet wool, rotting flesh, and stale tobacco, and you remember. It's morning in the trenches, though morning is only a suggestion. The sun barely peeks over the jagged horizon of barbed wire, and the fog lies thick as an old wool blanket. You can almost taste it on your tongue, a heavy, metallic mist that seems to carry whispers from no man's land. Breakfast is a small tin of corned beef, bully beef, accompanied by stale bread if you're lucky. You pry it open with trembling fingers, each movement sluggish from the cold and lack of sleep. The beef is greasy and jellied, and the bread is so dry that your gums bleed. But you force it down, because hunger is a more ruthless enemy than the Germans wading across the mud. The smell of frying bacon might drift into your mind, but that is a ghost of another life, a Sunday morning at home, mother humming softly by the stove. Here, every bite feels like chewing on your own hopelessness. As you finish this sorry excuse for a meal, you hear the low hum of distant shelling. It vibrates through your bones, a constant reminder that death is always pacing nearby. You peer over the top edge of the trench, careful not to expose your helmet. Beyond the sandbags, the land is a lunar landscape, cratered, lifeless, and littered with twisted barbed wire and the sad, collapsed forms of men who never made it back.
You see a comrade next to you, a young boy, really, barely old enough to shave. He's clutching a small letter. His lips move as he rereads it for the 100th time. You know it's from home. Perhaps a mother begging him to stay safe, or a sweetheart promising to wait. The ink is smudged from the damp, his fingers black with mud and lice bites. The lice are everywhere. You feel them crawling up your neck, nesting in your hair, wriggling under your collar. You scratch and scratch, but they always return, leaving red, angry welts that sting under your uniform. You've learned to share your body, your food, your nights with these tiny, merciless intruders. There's no real sanitation here. Latrines are nothing more than shallow holes dug in the mud. Sometimes, when the shelling is heavy, you don't even dare crawl out to relieve yourself. You simply do it where you stand, shivering with shame and cold. The stench is thick and intimate, a silent testament to the loss of dignity that war demands. Once, there were attempts at hygiene inspections, officers making their rounds, insisting on shaving or cleaning rifles. But what can cleanliness mean when your world is a swamp of decay? The mud eats everything: boots, bodies, spirits. You watch a friend try to pull his foot from the muck, only to lose his balance and fall face first into the filth. He doesn't even laugh. He just sighs, as if the mud has claimed another small piece of his humanity.
Nearby, a pot of tea is brewing. The liquid is murky and flecked with floating bits of ash and mud, but it's hot, and that alone feels like a miracle. You wrap your hands around the metal mug, feeling the warmth seep into your frozen fingers. For a fleeting moment, you close your eyes and pretend you're somewhere else, anywhere else. Then a distant cry cuts through the air. You look up to see a stretcher party struggling back from no man's land.
The wounded man on the stretcher is pale as the moon, his leg wrapped in a blood-soaked bandage. His eyes dart wildly, as if he's searching for some shred of comfort in this gray hell. You avert your gaze. It is easier not to look, not to think, not to feel. Yet, even amid this waking nightmare, soldiers find tiny moments of warmth, a shared cigarette, a whispered joke about an officer's ridiculous mustache, or a harmonica melody that floats above the trenches for a few tender minutes before vanishing into the fog. Tonight, as you lay your head down on a sandbag pillow, you might think of your mother's voice, or the way the sun felt on your skin before the mud claimed your soul. The contrast is sharp enough to bring tears, but there is no room for tears here. Only the shallow, ragged breathing of men who hope to see one more sunrise. And you, tucked safely in your bed tonight, might find it almost impossible to imagine. But imagine it you must, to understand the depth of human endurance and the absurd lengths we go to for power and pride.
The sun never truly rises here. It merely brightens the mud enough for you to see the rats scuttling away with scraps of bread. The morning roll call is a ritual of hollow names and haunted eyes. Each name called is met with a grunt or silence. And sometimes, when a man doesn't respond, no one dares to ask why. The day begins with Stand 2, a time just before dawn when everyone scrambles to the firing step, peering into the uncertain haze for any sign of movement. The fear of a surprise attack gnaws at every nerve. Fingers tremble on rifle triggers. Breaths come in tight gasps, as if the air itself is poisoned with dread. Once the threat seems to pass, you sink back into the monotony of trench life. Trench routine, they call it, as if there could be anything routine about such an existence. You might be ordered to repair the duckboards, the wooden paths that barely keep you above the muck. Your hands slip on the slick planks. Splinters embed themselves in your already cracked skin. The boards are heavy, swollen with moisture, and every movement sends a fresh shiver of pain through your aching back. Sometimes you're assigned to sentry duty, standing motionless for hours, scanning the horizon, listening for the faintest rustle. Each shadow feels alive. Every gust of wind becomes a potential gas attack. And always there is the smell. Sharp, sour, unforgettable.
Gas masks hang within reach, always ready. The masks are stiff and rubbery, their eyepieces fogging with every frantic breath. You dread the sudden hiss of gas shells more than bullets. Chlorine gas rolls in like a greenish fog, burning eyes and lungs, turning strong men into coughing, writhing husks. You hear stories of men clawing at their throats, their screams muffled inside the masks. Some rip them off in panic, only to meet death faster. Beyond the gas, there is the constant bombardment. Shells land at random, throwing up geysers of mud and shards of metal. You might be chatting with a friend one moment, and in the next find yourself staring at a red mist where he used to stand. The ground shakes so violently that your teeth chatter in your skull. You think of earthquakes, though here the tremors come from human hands. On quieter days, you find small distractions. You might scribble a letter home, though finding the words to describe this life feels impossible. What can you say? Dear mother, today I watched a rat eat a man's face. Doesn't quite fit the tender expectations of home. Instead, you write about the weather, about hoping to be home by Christmas, about the latest joke someone told. You leave out the bits where your soul feels like it's rotting faster than your boots. Mail is a lifeline. The crumpled paper smells faintly of lavender or soap or the kitchen at home. You hold it close, sometimes reading it a dozen times in a day. You imagine your mother's hands folding it, your sister's handwriting on the envelope. For a moment, the mud recedes.
Then comes the rations parade. You queue for a tin of watery soup and a wedge of bread, all under the gaze of watchful rats and curious lice. Sometimes there's jam, sweet, sticky, and a rare treat. You savor it slowly, letting each sugary smear remind you that somewhere in the world there are strawberries in bloom and bees drifting lazily in gardens. At night, you lie shivering under a thin blanket. Your mind drifts beyond the trench walls to fields of wheat, to the smell of freshly baked bread, to the warmth of a dog curled at your feet. You hear someone softly humming a lullaby his mother used to sing, the sound fragile and trembling against the moans of the wounded nearby. Sleep is a treacherous friend. It might wrap you in a temporary warmth, but it also opens the gates to nightmares. You see yourself running through no man's land, slipping in mud, dodging bullets that whistle past your ears like angry wasps. You wake up gasping, heart pounding, only to find yourself still in the same trench, the same mud, the same endless cold. It is a life of waiting, waiting to go over the top, waiting for a letter, waiting to die, waiting for a war that seems to stretch endlessly beyond the horizon. And yet these soldiers endure. They clutch tiny tokens of comfort. They share jokes about lice the size of horses. They dream of roast dinners and warm baths. In each man's eyes glows a fragile ember of hope, flickering against the vast darkness. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, you might hear echoes of their whispered prayers, carried by the same breeze that once moved across those muddy fields.
The order comes at dawn, as it so often does. A soft rustling through the trench, officers whispering in tight knots, men tightening straps, checking rifles with trembling hands. Over the top. Those 3 words carry a weight heavier than any rifle. You grip the wooden ladder, the cold biting into your palms. Your heart beats so loudly it drowns out the distant shelling. You can almost hear your mother's voice calling you back, begging you to stay safe, but there is no turning back. As you climb, you smell the fresh morning dew mixing with gunpowder and decaying flesh. You feel the roughness of the sandbags against your legs, the squelch of mud underfoot, threatening to drag you back down to the darkness. Then you're up. Suddenly, the world explodes into an orchestra of noise, whistles, shouts, machine gun fire crackling like tearing paper. The ground ahead is a chaos of craters, twisted wire and shattered helmets. You run, or try to. Your feet sink into the soft, churned-up earth, each step a battle against the sucking mud. You glance to your right and see a friend, the one who shared his last cigarette with you last night. His face is set in a strange calm, almost serene, until he crumples without a sound. You keep moving, because stopping means death. Your lungs burn, your fingers go numb around your rifle.
Shells burst around you, throwing hot shards of metal and clods of earth into the sky. The air is thick with smoke, making your eyes water, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. You trip over something. You don't look to see if it's a log or a man. You crawl, scramble, slip forward in the mud, pushing yourself with raw determination born only of survival instinct. When you finally collapse into a shell hole, your chest heaving, you hear the wails of the wounded drifting across the field.
Cries from mothers, for water, for mercy. You press your face into the mud, trying to disappear, wishing yourself into the earth. Hours pass, or maybe minutes. Time here is as twisted as the barbed wire around you. When the shelling eases, you drag yourself back to what remains of your trench. The smell hits you like a wall. Sweat, blood, cordite, and that ever-present reek of rotting mud. You're greeted by wide, hollow eyes. Those who stayed behind stare at you, trying to read your soul, as if your muddy, shivering body might offer answers. Did we win? Did anyone make it back? No words come. You collapse onto a bench, too tired to even remove your helmet. Later, as dusk settles and the sky bruises to a deep purple, the routine resumes. Someone tries to hand you tea, but your hands shake too much to hold the cup. You spill half of it down your coat. The warmth, a sharp contrast to your icy skin.
Nearby, a group of soldiers argues over a tin of jam. You hear laughter, brittle, exhausted laughter, as they mock the officer's clumsy attempt to spread the jam with a bayonet. For a moment, this fragile humor feels like a spark of humanity in a cavern of darkness. In the quiet moments, the trench becomes a confessional. A man sits cross-legged, muttering prayers. Another stares blankly at a photograph, running a thumb over a face he might never see again. One cleans his rifle over and over, as if trying to scrub away the memory of today's horror. Tonight, you lie under your lice-ridden blanket, too weary to dream. You listen to the rats rummaging, the coughing from the next dugout, the distant moans drifting on the damp wind. You feel the mud pressing into your clothes, into your skin, into your bones. It seeps into your soul as if it wants to claim you forever. You wonder if people at home imagine this when they talk about glory and heroism. Would they still wave flags and sing songs if they could feel this hunger, this cold, this constant dance with death? And yet, in this endless night, a thought flickers. Maybe you'll survive. Maybe there will be another sunrise, another letter from home, another chance to taste jam on bread and dream of your mother's cooking. That fragile hope is what keeps you breathing. As you rest your head, you can almost feel the warmth of your own bed back home, the softness of a clean pillow, the smell of fresh sheets. Hold that thought as you drift into sleep tonight. Let it cradle you in a gentle, impossible promise that one day you might truly be home again.
Morning comes again, though here it feels more like the world simply turns a page into another chapter of grayness. You're still alive, a small miracle. You open your eyes to the same cramped, suffocating trench, the same icy mud pressing against your skin like a second, unwanted lair. A corporal shouts for a working party. Today, your task is to retrieve bodies from the front line and bring them back for burial. The words fall heavy, like stones in your stomach. You hoist your shovel, your breath already shallow, and begin the slow, squelching march forward. The smell hits first, a sharp, sour blend of death and chemical residue from shells. You try to breathe through your mouth, but it doesn't help. The taste of decay coats your tongue like rancid butter. You find the first body tangled in barbed wire, his face frozen in a look of surprise, his hands reaching out as if to grasp a final thought that slipped away too soon. You revert your eyes and lift him carefully, the body stiff and oddly light, as if the soul has taken most of the weight with it. You lay him on the stretcher, mud squelching under each step as you carry him back. There's no ceremony here, no music or final words, just a shallow grave marked by a rough wooden cross
and a helmet perched on top.
After the burial detail, you return to your section, fingers numb and soul scraped raw. You try to scrub the smell off your hands, but it clings stubbornly, like an unwanted memory. You catch yourself daydreaming of soap, warm water, and soft towels, small luxuries that now seem more distant than the stars above. Lunchtime arrives, though lunch feels like a cruel joke. You open another tin of bully beef, the jelly quivering like something alive. You close your eyes and force it down, each chew a betrayal of your longing for real food. Crisp apples, roasted meat, fresh bread still warm from the oven. You look around at your comrades, each one wearing the same empty, faraway gaze. One man absent-mindedly picks lice from his collar, flicking them into the mud without a thought. Another scratches his scalp so hard that his nails come away bloody. The lice are an endless torment. They creep into every seam and every fold of clothing. Their tiny bites are a constant reminder that you've lost even the basic dignity of clean skin. The afternoon is filled with chores. You're assigned to drain a flooded dugout. You wade into water up to your knees, your boots filling instantly, your skin prickling with cold. You scoop bucket after bucket, your shoulders aching, the water splashing into your face, carrying with it bits of mud, bits of God knows what. Each bucket feels like an act of defiance against the trench itself, which seems determined to swallow you whole.
A friend nearby patches a trench wall with sandbags. He hums softly, an old folk song that rises above the sucking sound of mud and the distant echo of shells. For a fleeting moment, the trench feels almost human, like a twisted, broken home. At dusk, you gather for rum rations, a single shot of dark, burning liquid, handed out as if it were a holy sacrament. You tip it back, feeling it blaze down your throat, a rare warmth that cuts through the fog in your chest. It loosens tongues. Men swap jokes, tell stories of girls back home, of jobs they left behind, a bakery, a shoe shop, a farm. One man starts reciting poetry, his voice shaky but earnest. The lines tumble into the darkening trench, clinging to the edges of your mind like delicate ivy. For a few precious minutes, the mud and the rats fade, and you are somewhere else entirely, in a garden, under a clear sky, barefoot, on warm grass. But the magic breaks as a flare bursts overhead, flooding the trench in harsh white light. You duck instinctively, your heart lurching. Then silence returns, heavier than before. As night deepens, you curl up in your corner, your coat pulled tight, your helmet tipped forward to shield your face. You hear snoring, coughing, soft whimpers that echo like ghostly lullabies. You wonder if the stars above can see you, if they remember your face from before all this began. Back home, people might be sitting around the dinner table, laughing at silly jokes, dipping bread into thick soup, arguing over small worries. Here, in the trench, you argue with death itself, every hour, every breath. And yet, against all odds, a spark of hope glows stubbornly in your chest. You imagine one more morning, one more letter, one more chance to walk away from this mud-soaked nightmare and into a future that still seems possible.
Somewhere deep in the night, a rat scurries across your chest. You jerk awake, heart hammering, breath caught in your throat. In the moonlight, you see its beady eyes shining, its whiskers twitching as it vanishes into a crack in the trench wall. You lie still, listening. The symphony of the trench carries on. The faint sob of a young recruit, the hacking cough of a man 2 bunks down, the constant scratching of lice under rough wool. These sounds blend into a lullaby so grim and intimate, it becomes a strange comfort. Dawn arrives shrouded in mist. The cold slides into your bones like a blade. You try to stand, but your knees crack, your feet ache from trench foot. that slow, creeping rot caused by weeks of standing in icy water. You peel off your socks and find your skin pale and waxy, the smell sharp and sour. The medic glances at your feet and shakes his head, as if he's seen too many pairs just like yours, each one a small surrender to the mud. Breakfast is issued, a crust of stale bread and a spoonful of jam. The jam is a thin smear of brightness in an otherwise gray world. You close your eyes as it touches your tongue, imagining the sweet warmth of summer strawberries, the buzz of bees, the chatter of neighbors over a garden fence. The day's main task is repairing barbed wire. You crawl out into no man's land under the uncertain cover of fog. Each movement feels exposed, as if the universe itself is watching. The wire cuts your gloves and slices thin lines across your palms. You work quickly, every heartbeat loud in your ears.
You see fragments of another world scattered across the ground. A dented helmet, a torn photograph, the corner of a letter, a boot with no foot inside. Each piece whispers stories you'll never know. A mother's face, a lover's farewell, a child's birthday wish. You try not to look too closely. You make it back to the trench just as the fog begins to thin. Your fingers are sticky with blood, your breath ragged. You dip your hands in a puddle, but the water is murky and swirls with an oily rainbow sheen. You watch as the blood drift away, almost beautiful in its quiet dispersal. Later, the chaplain arrives. He speaks softly to a group of men gathered near a newly dug grave. His words float up into the gray sky, dissolving like smoke. You stand at a distance, unsure whether to join. You don't know what you believe anymore. God feels so far from this mud-soaked hell. Or maybe he's here, watching in silent sorrow, too powerless or too weary to intervene. In the afternoon, you help carry supplies, tins of bully beef, crates of ammunition, sacks of moldy bread. Your shoulders ache under the weight, but you keep going. At least this work keeps your mind occupied, stops it from wandering into the darker corners. At dusk, you find a letter waiting for you. You hold it reverently, as if it might vanish with a sudden breeze. The paper is smudged and damp, but you can still make out your sister's handwriting. She writes of roses blooming in the garden, of a neighbor's new baby, of how the cat refuses to sleep anywhere but your bed. You read it 3 times, each sentence a fragile thread that pulls you momentarily back to another life.
That night, the trench feels unusually quiet. Even the rats seem to have retreated into their nests. You sit with a friend, sharing the last cigarette of the day. The smoke curls into the night air, rising like a ghost. He tells you about his family farm, the smell of fresh hay, the lazy afternoons fishing by a stream, his mother's laughter echoing from the kitchen. You close your eyes and imagine it with him. You can almost hear the splash of water, feel the sun on your face. Before you turn in, you look up at the sky. The stars are sharp and clear tonight, like silver pins in black velvet. You wonder if your mother is looking at the same stars, if she feels you in her heart, if she whispers to the night, hoping her son is safe somewhere far away. Tonight, in your damp corner, you cling to that thought. You wrap it around you tighter than any blanket, a fragile armor against the cold, the lice, the rats, and the endless fear. You breathe slowly, deeply, letting the idea of home drift through your mind like a lullaby. As your eyes grow heavy, you remind yourself there is still a future beyond this trench, beyond this mud, beyond this endless gray. There is warmth, laughter, fresh bread, and fields of sunlit wheat waiting somewhere. Hold that vision close as you sleep tonight. Let it guide you through the darkness, Toward the dawn you still hope will come.
The next morning arrives on a hush, like a cat slipping into a room. You open your eyes slowly, half expecting to find yourself in your old bed, the sun pouring through lace curtains, the smell of bread drifting up the stairs. But no, the reality returns, heavy and damp, like a wet overcoat you can't peel off. Today, there is talk of a big push. The officers stride through the trench with an almost theatrical seriousness, maps in hand, their polished boots miraculously cleaner than anyone else's. You watch them, half amused, half bitter. They speak in brisk, clipped tones about objectives and advances, as if men were chess pieces, each move just a neat calculation. For now, you are ordered to reinforce the trench walls. You wedge wooden planks into the sucking mud, each one creaking as it settles. The smell of wet earth mixes with the sharp scent of rotting sandbags, creating a pungent perfume unique to these cursed ditches. As you work, your mind drifts. You remember the squeak of a bicycle on a village lane, the smell of warm apples from the orchard, the small pleasure of feeling grass between your toes. Each memory is a tiny rebellion against the gray present. Lunch is rushed, a watery stew with floating lumps that could be meat or something else entirely. You don't ask questions anymore. You slurp it down, trying not to taste it, just grateful for the fleeting warmth. A friend passes by and tosses you a small chunk of chocolate, a treasure beyond words. You let it melt slowly on your tongue, the sweetness almost shocking after weeks of salt and fat. It pulls you back for a moment to a birthday party long ago, to sticky fingers and childish laughter.
The afternoon brings a heavy rain, the kind that pounds the trench roofs and turns walkways into rivers. You watch the water rise, swallowing boards and boots alike. Men scramble to build small barricades, but it's hopeless. The trench has its own hunger, and today it wants water. Your feet slip and slide with each step. Your body shivers so violently it feels like your bones are rattling. You wring out your socks for the 10th time, knowing they'll be soaked again within minutes. In the far corner, a man stands silently, staring at nothing. His lips move without sound, his eyes glassy. You wonder where he's gone inside himself, what final safe place he's hiding in. As night falls, an unexpected lull drifts over the trench. No shells tonight, no surprise gas clouds. Just the sound of rain and the low murmur of exhausted voices. Someone starts humming an old hymn, and others join in, their wavering tones stitching together like a fragile blanket against the darkness. You share your corner with another soldier tonight. You don't know his full name, just that he loves fishing and has a dog named Toby waiting for him at home. You lie shoulder to shoulder, each grateful for the extra warmth.
You talk in whispers about what you'll do after the war. He wants to open a small bakery, he says, to fill the air with the smell of fresh bread instead of cordite and decay. You promise to visit, to buy a loaf every morning and sit on a bench outside, letting the sun warm your face. It sounds so simple, so impossibly sweet, you almost believe it could happen. As he drifts off, you stay awake a while longer, listening to the rain. You think of your mother's hands kneading dough, your sister braiding her hair by the window, the gentle clatter of a teacup on a saucer. Each image feels like a small lantern flickering in your mind. You wonder how many more nights you'll spend here, how many more mornings you'll greet with dread. But somewhere beneath all the layers of mud and lice and sorrow, there's a stubborn ember that refuses to die. You cling to it fiercely now, as the rain drums its endless rhythm above. Let that ember guide you. Let it remind you that there are fields yet to walk, rivers yet to fish,
loaves yet to bake. As you finally let your eyes close, you breathe in the damp, heavy air and imagine it is the scent of a meadow after rain, a field bursting with wildflowers. Sleep now, my friend. You have survived another day. Let your dreams be kind tonight.
Morning arrives with a grudging sigh. The rain has slowed, but everything is soaked through, heavy as a sodden coat on your shoulders. You peel yourself from the trench wall, feeling the mud tug at your coat like a child begging you to stay. Your companion, the would-be baker, gives you a small, tired nod. His eyes look older than they did last night, as though they aged decades while you both tried to sleep. The officers call for a cleanup, a phrase that sounds almost comical here. You're sent to clear debris from the trench floor, broken boards, scraps of tin, rat carcasses half submerged in puddles. Use a battered shovel, each scoop slurping like a hungry mouth. At one point you find a helmet, half filled with rainwater and something unidentifiable floating inside. You tip it out and catch a glimpse of a name scratched inside the rim. Someone's brother, someone's son. You place it gently on a ledge, almost as if returning it to its owner. Later, a new group of replacements arrives. Fresh faces, clean uniforms still smelling of soap and new wool. Their eyes dart around, wide and bright, taking in every detail with naive fascination. You watch them and remember your own first day, when you believed in glory, in swift victories, in going home by Christmas.
One boy asks you what it's really like. You look at him, his cheeks still pink with life, and you want to tell him about the rats, the gas, the way your soul feels like it's rotting faster than your boots. But instead, you just shrug. You say, "You'll see soon enough," and turn away, feeling the weight of all the unsaid things sink into your bones. The day drags on, an endless cycle of repairs, drills, and shivering in wet clothes. Every movement feels heavy, as though you're wading through a dream or a nightmare that refuses to end. At noon, you get a letter from home. It's from your mother this time. Her words are soft, full of small news, a neighbor's wedding, the new calf born on the farm, the scent of lilacs blooming by the kitchen door. You trace each sentence with your finger, as though touching her voice. She tells you to stay strong, that she prays for you every night. You can almost hear her voice breaking on those words. See her sitting at the kitchen table, the candle flickering as she folds her hands. You swallow the sudden lump in your throat, wiping at your eyes with a muddy sleeve. Dinner is a cold stew, ladled from a dented pot, its contents more mystery than meal. You eat slowly, savoring each bite as though it might be the last. The taste is bland, but tonight, even blandness feels like comfort.
Afterwards, you help a friend pick lice from his shirt seams, the two of you leaning close under a dim lantern. The small popping sounds of crushed lice break the silence, a grim reminder of the intimacy forced upon you all. You exchange jokes between pinches, small dark pearls of humor meant to keep madness at bay. A sudden hush falls as a mailbag is tossed into the trench. Everyone crowds around, hands eager, eyes wide. You see a man unfold a child's drawing, a crooked house with smoke curling from the chimney, a stick figure waving in a bright yellow sun. He stares at it for a long time, smiling with a softness you didn't think possible here. As darkness settles, the trench glows in small pockets of lantern light. Someone strums a battered guitar with only 3 strings, the broken chord stumbling into the damp night air. A few men hum along, voices fragile as moth wings. You lean back, feeling the trench wall pressing into your spine, and gaze at the sky. The stars blink above you, unbothered by barbed wire and muddy boots. You imagine climbing up into that sky, floating above the fields and forests,
drifting far away to a place where no shells fall and no lice bite. Tonight, the mud feels almost warm. Or maybe that's just the exhaustion wrapping around your bones like an old quilt. You let your eyes close, holding your mother's letter against your chest. In your final thoughts before sleep, you promise yourself you will return. You will walk through the garden gate. You will smell the lilacs. You will feel the sun on your neck and the kitchen floor cool beneath your bare feet. You repeat it like a prayer, over and over, until it becomes a lullaby. Sleep well, dear listener. May your own blankets feel softer tonight, your dreams kinder, and your heart steadier.
The next day breaks under a pale, tired sun. You stretch, feeling the protest in every muscle, every joint stiff from the cold and the mud that seeps into your very bones. Your fingers are cracked, your nails black with grime. You think about warm, soapy water, about towels smelling of lavender, a dream so distant it feels like it belongs to another life. The morning begins with weapons inspection. You line up your rifle, your bayonet, your tarnished mess tin. An officer strides past, gloved hands clasped behind his back, eyes sharp and judgmental. You feel his gaze brush over you like a chill wind. Your rifle has jammed before, a silent terror during a charge. You remember that day, the click that never became a bang, the moment your heart seemed to stop altogether. You spent that entire attack with your bayonet clutched like a dagger, each breath a frantic prayer. After inspection, you're ordered to fix duckboards again. You slog through the muck, your boots making that thick, wet, sucking sound. Each board is heavy with water, covered in slippery algae that makes your footing dangerous. A man nearby slips, crashing face first into the mud. You rush to help him up, but his laughter echoes strangely, a hollow, broken sound, more hysteria than humor. While working, you find a tin mug half buried in the sludge. You rinse it off, tracing the initials scratched into the side. Another lost story, another small echo of a life paused too soon. You set it on the edge of the trench, a silent monument that no one will remember.
Lunch arrives, and today it's a thin soup, a single biscuit, and tea so weak it looks like cloudy water. You savor it anyway, blowing carefully on the steaming surface, imagining for a moment that it is strong, fragrant, and served in a porcelain cup by a gentle hand. You glance around and see your friend, the one who dreams of a bakery, staring off into the sky. You nudge him, and he blinks as though waking from a long sleep. He shows you a small, crumpled photo, a dog with floppy ears and a lopsided grin. "Toby," he whispers, and his voice nearly cracks. You nod, trying to conjure the smell of dog fur after rain, the way a dog curls against your legs on a cold night. These simple things are treasures now, shining brighter than any metal. In the afternoon, the trench becomes a flurry of activity. Rumors ripple through the line, a new offensive coming soon. You watch men checking their gear, sharpening bayonets, writing last letters home. One man stares at a blank piece of paper for hours, his pencil hovering, trembling. What do you write when you might not return? What words could possibly hold all that fear, all that love? As dusk drapes itself across the trench, the chatter grows softer. Lanterns glow like tiny fireflies against the mud walls. You hear a few muffled sobs, a prayer whispered into a sleeve, a hand clutching a rosary so tight the knuckles go white.
A sergeant calls for a head count. You all gather, shifting in the mud, each name called out into the dusk. Your friend leans close and murmurs that he's baking bread in his dreams tonight, fresh and steaming, slathered in butter. You smile, though your lips crack painfully in the cold air.
Before bedding down, you pull out your mother's letter again. You read it slowly, savoring each curve of ink like a piece of chocolate on the tongue. You imagine her sitting in the kitchen, the kettle whistling softly, her hands moving in that gentle, rhythmic way you remember from childhood. When you finally lie down, the trench is strangely quiet. The rats scurry less tonight, perhaps sensing the heavy anticipation in the air. You close your eyes, pressing the letter to your chest. In your mind, you walk down a garden path lined with roses. You hear a door creak open, see a warm light spilling onto the grass. You hear your mother call your name, her voice carrying across the evening air like a soft blanket. You walk faster, your heart swelling, your lungs filling with the scent of home. But even in this dream, you feel the mud tugging at your ankles, the weight of the trench pulling you backward. You fight to keep moving forward, clinging to each petal, each note of her voice, each flicker of warmth. Sleep comes slowly, and tonight it feels fragile, like a glass ornament swaying on a winter tree. May your sleep be gentler than theirs tonight. May you hold your loved ones closer and feel each breath as a gift.
The morning starts with a thin layer of frost glinting on the trench edges, a cruelly beautiful sparkle that feels almost mocking. You rub your hands together, your breath rising in white puffs that drift and vanish in the icy air. The frost clings to your eyelashes, turning each blink into a tiny, cold struggle. Rations arrive, though calling them rations feels generous. A sliver of cheese, a slice of bread so hard you nearly chip a tooth, and weak tea, lukewarm and metallic from its dented tin. You chew slowly, as if each crumb might hold some secret strength to get you through the day. Word spreads that tonight will bring an attack. The officers move with forced calm, giving orders in tight, controlled voices. You can see the fear hiding behind their clipped words, the way their hands fidget at their sides. In the lull before preparations, you decide to shave. You find a tiny shard of mirror, the glass cracked like a spiderweb. You smear cold water on your face, feeling each pore sting awake. The blade skips and scrapes across your skin, leaving small nicks that sting in the cold. But for a moment, you see a glimpse of yourself, the boy who used to skip stones on the pond, who once stood awkwardly at a school dance, cheeks flushed. Nearby, your friend, the baker dreamer, patches his uniform. His hands are shaking so badly he can hardly thread the needle. You watch the small, meticulous movements and feel a pang of tenderness. You offer to help, and together you mend the torn sleeve in silence, the cold air heavy with unspoken fears.
By afternoon, the trench transforms into a machine of preparation. Ammunition is checked and rechecked. Letters are handed to runners, each envelope a trembling goodbye wrapped in cheap paper. You add yours to the pile, your handwriting jagged from shivering. You hear someone humming, the same hymn that drifted through the trench nights ago. The tune weaves through the mud-soaked air, curling around you like a ghostly hand. As the sky dims to a bruised purple, you gather in small groups. Men share final cigarettes, passing them back and forth with cracked lips and shaking fingers. A few laugh, but the sound is brittle, the kind that snaps in the wind. Your friend shows you a small token, a crust of bread he saved from yesterday. "For luck," he says, forcing a crooked smile.
You nod, squeezing his arm, your throat too tight to answer. In the last moments before going over, you check your gear again. Your rifle, your helmet, your gas mask hanging awkwardly around your neck. The mask smells of rubber and sweat, a smell you have come to both fear and depend on. A whistle pierces the evening. Time stops for a breath. You feel your heart slam against your ribs like a trapped bird. Then you climb, 1 foot over the edge, and the world shatters into motion. Mud sucks at your boots as you scramble forward. The air explodes with artillery, dirt and metal raining down. You see shapes ahead, friends, shadows, enemies, all blurred into one violent storm.
Your friend is beside you at first, his eyes wide, mouth open in a silent yell. Then he's gone, swallowed by smoke and earth. You don't have time to look back. You charge forward, bayonet raised, lungs on fire, your mind a blur of prayers and curses. The ground is a patchwork of craters and wire, bodies and discarded weapons. You slip, fall face first into the mud, the taste of metal and blood filling your mouth. You crawl, push up again, surge forward. Every second stretches into an eternity, each heartbeat an entire lifetime. You finally dive into a shell hole, gasping, shaking. You press yourself into the dirt, feeling it pulse beneath you like a living thing. Overhead, flares burst, turning the night into a harsh, flickering theater of terror. In that hole, time feels like it has stopped. You hear the thunder of shells, the shouts and screams, but also a strange, muffled silence inside your own head. You touch your chest, feeling your heart still hammering, the warmth of life still stubbornly clinging to you. You think of home, of lilacs and warm bread, of your mother's hands, your sister's laugh, the dog barking at the garden gate. You whisper their names, each word a fragile charm against the chaos. Above, the stars tremble, the only witnesses to this midnight dance of mud and fire. Tonight, as you close your eyes, may you feel the softness of your own bed more deeply than ever, and hold close the thought that somewhere beyond all this mud and madness, there is still peace waiting, still fields to walk, still mornings to wake into.
You lie in that shell hole, pressed into the cold, sucking mud, your breath ragged and sharp in the midnight air. The world around you is a shifting nightmare of flickering flares, cracking rifles, and the deep, gut-shaking thump of artillery. Each blast feels like it rattles the stars themselves. Your hands claw at the earth, fingers numb and raw. Somewhere nearby, a voice cries out for help, thin and wavering, echoing through the blackness like a lost child's call. You feel the pull to move, to help, but your legs refuse, locked in a terrified paralysis. Slowly, the noise ebbs, like a storm drifting out to sea. You lift your head and see the twisted remains of no man's land. Barbed wire glints like black fangs in the moonlight. Bodies lie twisted and half-submerged in craters, their shapes unfamiliar and heartbreakingly human all at once. When you finally manage to crawl back to what's left of the trench, you're greeted by silent, wide-eyed faces. Men stagger past like phantoms, mud and blood caked in every crease of their skin. You look for your friend, the baker with the crust of bread. You scan each figure, each broken silhouette, but he is not there. You sit down hard on a collapsed duckboard, your breath coming in shallow gasps. A medic passes,
his arms full of bandages, stained a deep, shocking red. He pauses just long enough to slap a canteen into your hands before disappearing again into the darkness. You drink, the water gritty and lukewarm, but it feels like the finest wine sliding down your throat.
A man beside you stares blankly at his own hands, opening and closing them as if he can't quite remember what they're for. His lips move in a silent prayer, or perhaps a question that will never have an answer. At first light, a thin, ghostly dawn creeps across the churned earth. You see the trench in its raw, pitiful state, walls caved in, sandbags split and spilling like disemboweled organs, rifles sticking up from the mud at odd angles like skeletal arms. An officer orders a working party to repair the line. You join, moving in a daze, shoveling mud, stacking boards, your mind floating somewhere else. Every now and then you catch yourself looking at the horizon, imagining a field of golden wheat swaying in the breeze instead of barbed wire and death. When rations come, you force yourself to eat. A handful of boiled potatoes, a slice of greasy meat that tastes faintly of tin and old fat. You chew mechanically, staring into the middle distance. A man across from you is carefully cleaning his boots, an act that seems almost absurd in this sea of mud. But you watch him, somehow comforted by the small act of stubborn humanity. Later, you're sent to collect letters and personal effects from the fallen. You move through the field slowly, each step deliberate, as though you're wading in water. You find a phytograph here, a broken pocket watch there, a small book of poems, its pages stiff with dried mud. Each object feels impossibly heavy in your hands, each one a fragment of a story abruptly cut short.
You find his helmet first, your friend's. Then, a few feet away, his body. His eyes are closed, his face strangely peaceful, as if he finally found the warmth of a kitchen oven, the scent of bread rising in the air. You kneel, fingers trembling, and gently remove the crust of bread from his pocket. You hold it in your palm for a long moment before tucking it into your own coat. A silent promise, I will carry this home for you. Back in the trench, you place the collected belongings in a small pile. Each item will be packed and sent home, final echoes of sons and brothers, of dreams that now drift like ghosts through these corridors of mud. As dusk falls, you sit alone with the crust of bread. You press it to your lips, not to eat, but to feel the warmth of the memory it carries. You close your eyes and imagine your friend's voice, the crack in his laugh, the quiet dreams of flour-dusted mornings in a small, bright bakery. Above, the first stars blink awake, indifferent to the mud and sorrow below. You watch them, imagining that each one holds a lost soul, each a tiny lantern lighting the way home. Tonight, let us hold those small lanterns close. Let us remember that even in the deepest mud, in the darkest night, there is still a flicker of warmth, a whisper of home, a promise of bread baking somewhere far away.
The next morning unfolds slowly, the air heavy and damp, clinging to your lungs with each shaky breath. You open your eyes to the same bleak palette of mud and wire, but today, something feels different. A hush drapes the trench like a thick, gray blanket. A mist hangs over no man's land, softening the edges of barbed wire and crater lips, making the battlefield look almost peaceful in a cruel, deceptive way. You run your fingers over the crust of bread hidden in your pocket, the last physical piece of your friend the baker. It feels warm despite the cold, as if it carries his spirit. The morning begins with a burial detail.
You and a small group move carefully along the trench line, carrying simple wooden crosses and battered shovels. Each grave is shallow, each ceremony short and quiet. A few whispered words, a brief nod to heaven. You lower bodies into the earth, the mud swallowing them like a hungry mouth. You whisper a promise to each one. You are not forgotten. When you return to the trench, you notice a boy, barely a man, sitting with his knees pulled to his chest. His eyes are glassy, his helmet too large for his narrow face. He clutches a small tin of jam, turning it over and over in his hands like a talisman. You sit beside him, close enough that your shoulders touch. You don't say anything. Words feel too small for this place. After a while, he offers you a fingerful of jam. You taste it slowly, letting the sweetness remind you of sunlit breakfasts and stolen spoonfuls in your mother's kitchen.
Around midday, a shell lands nearby, shaking the trench walls and showering you in dirt. You press your head to your knees, heart pounding so hard it almost drowns out the screams echoing down the line. When you finally look up, you see a gaping hole where a section of the trench used to be, smoke curling lazily like a ghost rising into the pale sky. You help pull survivors from the rubble, your hands moving on instinct now. You haul men by their arms, drag them through the sludge, whispering half-remembered reassurances. You're okay. You'll make it. Though neither of you truly believes it. When the dust settles, you lean against the wall, shaking. Your hands are black with soot and blood, and you can't stop staring at them. A medic passes and offers you a cigarette. You accept, the smoke burning your throat, each exhale a small surrender to exhaustion. Later you gather for what passes is supper, a thin stew, more water than anything else. Someone passes around a tin of biscuits, each man breaking off tiny pieces, as if stretching them might somehow stretch time itself. A small game starts among a few men, guessing what they'll eat first when they get home. One man swears he'll have a whole roast chicken to himself. Another dreams of apple pie, still warm from the oven, with thick cream spooned over the top. You close your eyes and imagine your mother's soup, steaming and rich, with soft bread to dip until it disappears.
As night falls, the trench slips into a cautious quiet. You hear someone softly humming a lullaby, the notes floating above the mud and mingling with the low murmur of the wind. You clutch the crust of bread in your hand like a charm, its edges rough against your palm. You wonder if your friend's mother will ever know that her son died clutching this bread, dreaming of ovens and warm mornings. You hope she will imagine him as you do now, whole and smiling, flour on his cheeks, the smell of dough in the air. Above, the stars begin their silent watch again. You tilt your head back, tracing shapes you used to know by heart, Orion, the Pleiades, the North Star that guided sailors and dreamers alike. You imagine each star as a window, a glimpse into kitchens and gardens and bedrooms lit by soft lamps. Tonight, you promise yourself you will not forget these moments, the sweetness of jam on a cold morning, the warmth of a shoulder against yours, the soft echo of a lullaby drifting through the mud. As your eyelids grow heavy, you imagine yourself stepping through your front door, the smell of soup wrapping around you, your mother's arms waiting. You imagine pressing that crust of bread into her hands, telling her it carried a promise all the way home. Sleep now, with the mud beneath you and the stars above you. Remember, even here, in this trench of horror and hunger, a piece of bread, a spoonful of jam, or a single star can still hold the entire universe of a human heart. You wake to a low, endless rumble.
the kind that vibrates through your ribs and makes your teeth ache. The ground itself seems to breathe beneath you, restless and alive. You sit up slowly, feeling the crust of bread still pressed against your chest, as though it anchored you here among the living. A thin, pale light crawls across the trench. Men move like sleepwalkers, shuffling through the mud with vacant eyes. You watch as one man uses his helmet to scoop water from a crater, each sip tinged with mud and oil, but swallowed gratefully. Another man tries to light a cigarette with shaking hands, the flame trembling before finally catching. Breakfast is nothing more than a scrap of biscuit and a ladle of grayish tea. You chew each bite as if it might disappear before you finish. Around you, quiet murmurs drift in the fog. Someone humming an old pub tune, another reciting a prayer under his breath. You feel these sounds settle on your shoulders like a thin blanket, barely enough to keep out the cold. The day's orders arrive. Dig a new communication trench forward toward no man's land. You and the others gather picks and shovels, the tools heavy in your frost-bitten fingers. You drag yourself up over the trench edge, crawling on your belly like an animal, each movement careful, each breath measured. The mud grabs at you, sucking your elbows and knees deeper, as if trying to keep you forever. You push on, your breath echoing loudly inside your helmet, your heart thumping like a drum in your throat. Hours pass in a strange, timeless blur. You swing your pick again and again, the earth splitting reluctantly under each blow. You pause only to rub at your eyes or catch a few mouthfuls of cold air. Your hands blister and bleed, the salty stings sharp enough to remind you that you're still here, still somehow whole.
At one point, you find yourself next to a man muttering to a photograph pinned inside his helmet. He talks as though the person in the picture is standing right beside him, answering each of his soft questions. You look away, feeling the ache in your own chest tighten. When dusk begins to settle, the digging stops. You collapse onto your knees, body trembling, mud clinging to every inch of you like a second skin. You hear the shriek of distant shells and the muffled pop of flares, but they feel far away, like sounds from another world. Back in the trench, a few men gather around a small, flickering flame. Someone managed to heat a tin of beans, and they pass it carefully, each spoonful met with closed eyes and small, grateful sighs. You are offered a bite, and as the warm, salty taste slides over your tongue, it feels like a sudden, fleeting miracle. Later, you unwrap the crust of bread again, holding it in your lap. You speak to it softly, as if it might answer. You tell it about the digging, about the photograph man, about the tin of beans. You promise it, and your friend, wherever he is now, that you will carry it home, that you will keep the warmth alive somehow.
Night arrives with a hush. The stars above are sharper tonight, piercing the dark with an almost painful beauty. You see them and think of windows lit in distant homes, of warm kitchens and quiet hallways echoing with soft footsteps. Someone begins to sing, voice thin and raw. The song spreads, catching in other throats until the whole trench vibrates with this trembling, fragile chorus. It's not in tune, not even always in time, but it is honest. Each note a small act of defiance against the cold and the mud and the endless, hungry dark. You join in, your voice low and rough. As you sing, you think of your mother's face, of your sister leaning in a doorway, of a dog's tail thumping against the floor. You imagine warmth and light, the smell of bread, the gentle weight of a blanket pulled up to your chin. Tonight, you hold that crust of bread close, feeling it against your heart, a tiny ember refusing to go out. You whisper good night to the stars, to your friend, to the silent fields beyond the wire. As sleep drifts toward you, you breathe deeply, letting the last notes of the song carry you into dreams softer than the mud beneath you, brighter than the flares above. Sleep gently now. Hold on to that ember. The world you dream of is still out there, waiting.
The next morning, you open your eyes slowly, as if waking from a long, heavy dream. The trench around you is hushed, the usual shuffle and coughs replaced by a brittle, watchful quiet. You sit up, feeling every joint creak, the mud crusted on your uniform cracking like old paint. You look down at the crust of bread in your hands, now hard as a stone, but somehow still warm in your mind. You tuck it carefully into your pocket, close to your heart, a small piece of home that refuses to die. A sudden whistle slices through the morning air. Orders come quickly, a patrol into no man's land. Your stomach clenches. You see men glance at each other, eyes wide, hands trembling. You feel your own heart lurch as if trying to leap from your chest and escape. You line up, the mud sucking at your boots as you move. Each man checks his rifle again and again, as if hoping the ritual might protect him. You do the same, fingers numb, your breath shallow. You climb over the top, moving low and slow, the fog hanging heavy around you like a damp shroud. The ground is a patchwork of craters, barbed wire snarled like black thorns, and shattered helmets peeking through the mud like buried ghosts. You listen to your own breath echo inside your helmet, each inhale a loud, hollow promise to stay alive. You step carefully, feeling the earth shift under your feet. Suddenly, a flare bursts overhead, turning the world white and monstrous. You freeze, feeling your heartbeat in your teeth, your knees locked in the mud. Shadows twist and leap in the blinding light, each one a possible enemy, each one a possible end. Shots crackle through the night, sharp as breaking glass. You drop to your belly, pressing your face into the cold, wet ground. The taste of mud fills your mouth, bitter and metallic. You crawl forward inch by inch, feeling barbed wire tug at your sleeves and tear your skin. Around you, men shout, some in anger, some in terror, some in final, fading pleas. The noise crashes over you in waves, too big to fight, too loud to ignore. You press on, driven by a primal force that doesn't feel like bravery so much as sheer, stubborn survival. Finally, after what feels like centuries, you find a shell hole and roll inside. You huddle there, chest heaving, the smell of blood and earth thick around you. Your hands shake so violently you have to hold them tight against your chest to stop them. When the flares die down and the shots thin out, you look around. A shape moves nearby, another soldier crawling toward you. As he collapses beside you, you recognize his face, the boy with the jam tin. His eyes are wide, his breath ragged. You grip his hand, squeezing as hard as you can. He tries to speak, but only a thin, wet gurgle comes out. His hand clutches yours tighter, then loosens. You feel his fingers slip away, feel the warmth leave his skin. You hold on anyway, your breath breaking in sharp sobs that echo in the crater.
When the signal finally comes to return, you force yourself to move. You don't remember climbing back over the wire, don't remember the run, the duck, the crawl. You only remember the cold, the mud, and the ghostly weight of that boy's hand in yours. Back in the trench, you collapse against the wall, your body shaking so hard you can barely hold yourself upright. Someone passes a cup of tea to you, cold and weak, but you drink it like it's the sweetest nectar. You pull the crust of bread from your pocket and press it to your lips, your tears soaking into its rough surface. You whisper to it, to the boy, to the friend who dreamed of baking, to all the voices now lost in the mud. Above, the night falls again, stars scattered like tiny lanterns across a black sea. You stare up, each breath a silent promise. I will remember. I will carry you home. In the distance, the guns rumble on, a cruel lullaby for a world too exhausted to listen. You close your eyes and imagine the kitchen light spilling onto the garden, the warmth of your mother's embrace, the laughter of your sister echoing through the hall. Tonight, as you drift into a sleep thick with ghosts and echoes, you clutch the crust of bread like a talisman. May your own dreams be gentler than these. May your breath come easy, and may you always feel the warmth of home in your bones.
Morning crawls into the trench like a wounded animal, slow, quiet, almost ashamed to show its face. You sit hunched against the wall, the crust of bread still pressed against your heart. Your eyes are red and swollen, but the tears have finally dried into a salty film on your cheeks. Around you, the trench shuffles back to life. Men rise from the mud like ghosts, stretching stiff limbs, coughing into frozen hands. Someone mutters a prayer, another curses the cold. A thin mist clings to everything, turning each movement into a slow-motion dance. A runner arrives with a fresh stack of letters. You watch as names are called, each word like a candle flickering in the gloom. Some men tear open envelopes immediately, devouring the words with desperate eyes. Others tuck them into pockets, saving them for a quieter moment, as if there is such a thing here. Your own name isn't called today. You feel the sting of that absence more sharply than any wound. You imagine your mother sitting at the kitchen table, pen in hand, her brow furrowed as she struggles to find the right words to reach you across all this mud and terror. Breakfast is issued, a thin, oily broth and a heel of bread so hard it might as well be a stone. You force it down, each chew echoing through the hollow of your chest. Afterwards, you're assigned to latrine duty. You grip the handle of a rusty spade, the cold biting into your palms. You move slowly, digging shallow pits in the muck, your mind floating far from the trench. You imagine the smell of soap, of a freshly scrubbed kitchen floor, of lavender hanging in the warm summer air. Each shovelful of mud brings you further away and closer at once, a strange kind of meditation that blurs the line between filth and memory.
Nearby, a man sits with his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. You know better than to ask. You place a hand on his back for a moment before moving on. In this place, comfort is given in silent gestures, in shared breaths and small wordless touches. At midday, a lull falls. You find a spot on a splintered bench, staring at your boots. A rat scurries past, fat and brazen, its eyes glinting as it drags a piece of biscuit into the shadows. You watch it disappear, feeling an odd kinship with the creature. Both of you survivors in a world that seems to have forgotten what mercy looks like. Later, you help a medic carry wounded men from a nearby dugout. Each man is a study in pain. Eyes unfocused, limbs twisted, lips whispering for mothers, for God, for home.
You feel the weight of each body through the stretcher handles, each life a fragile thread threatening to snap at any moment. You catch sight of a young man gripping a folded piece of paper to his chest even as his eyes glaze over. You want to tell him he'll make it, that he'll read that letter by a warm fire someday, but the words die before they reach your lips. As dusk falls, the trench fills with that heavy electric silence that precedes a storm. You gather with a few others passing a dented tin of tea. It's lukewarm, the taste more rust than leaf, but you savor it as if it were a fine vintage.
Someone begins to tell a story, a half-forgotten tale of a fishing trip, of blue skies and shimmering water. The words are clumsy, the details tangled, but you cling to each one, weaving them into a tapestry of lost summers and gentle afternoons. You take out the crust of bread once more, holding it in your lap like a sacred relic. You think of the baker boy, of his hands dusted with flour, of his shy dreams spoken in the dark. You imagine him now, standing behind a wooden counter, the warm smell of rising dough filling the air. You break off a tiny piece of the crust and place it in your mouth. It is dry and tasteless, but for a moment it transforms into fresh bread, warm from the oven, melting with butter. For a heartbeat, you are not in the trench, but in a kitchen, surrounded by light and laughter. As night drapes itself across the sky, you lean back and close your eyes. You listen to the slow, uneven breaths of the men around you, to the distant rumble of guns that have become as constant as your own heartbeat. Tonight you dream not of mud and wire, but of open fields, of dogs barking in the distance, of bread baking in the early morning glow. Sleep now. Hold fast to that warmth, that echo of another life. Let it carry you beyond the mud, beyond the wire, all the way home.
The morning light creeps in slowly, shy and pale, as though it too hesitates to witness the trench's quiet despair. You stir awake, the crust of bread still clutched to your chest, a silent promise echoing between your heartbeat and the cold earth beneath you. A thin layer of frost sparkles on the trench walls, turning each barbed wire loop and each muddy footprint into a cruel kind of lace. You stretch, your joints cracking like old wood, and feel the sting of cold on your raw fingertips. Breakfast arrives, a small tin of sardines shared among too many hands. You take your turn, swallowing the briny mouthful, the salt sharp and shocking on your tongue. You close your eyes and imagine the sea, waves crashing, gulls wheeling overhead, the scent of salt on a summer breeze. Today's orders are for salvage. You and a small group climb out to retrieve what can be saved from no man's land: rifles, ammunition, supplies, and bodies. You move in a slow line, bent low, each man a dark shape against the pale sky. As you step into the wasteland, the mud clutches at your boots like hands refusing to let you go. You force yourself forward, your breath a slow chant. Keep moving, keep moving. You find a rifle half buried, its barrel twisted, its stock splintered. You pull it free and sling it over your shoulder, a ghostly weight pressing between your shoulder blades. Further on, you see a helmet cradling a pool of rainwater. You pick it up carefully, turning it in your hands as though it might whisper its last secrets.
Among the debris, you come across a battered pack. Inside, a knitted scarf, a scrap of soap, a folded letter now stained and torn.
You hold it to your nose, hoping for a hint of lavender, of home, but all you smell is mud and gunpowder. You tuck it gently into your coat, an unspoken vow to carry it back. The work stretches through the morning. Each step, each retrieved item feels like a tiny funeral. You catch sight of another man carefully placing a fallen comrade's pipe into his own pocket, eyes glistening as he does. These small gestures become the final threads stitching you all together. By afternoon, you stagger back into the trench, your shoulders aching, your spirit is heavy as the mud caked on your boots. A kettle boils weak tea over a small flame, its steam curling into the cold air like a thin, fragile prayer. You sip from a shared tin mug, the warmth sliding down your throat like a whispered lullaby. A nearby group huddles close, passing around a single cigarette. You watch the ember glow bright in the dim light, each inhale an act of defiance against the endless damp and dark. You see smiles flicker, thin and fleeting, but real, small fires in the gloom. Later you find a moment alone. You pull out the crust of bread and the folded letter you rescued. You read the words, though they are smeared and broken. ... always, love you, come home safe, garden blooming.
You close your eyes and imagine the garden, rows of tomatoes glistening in the sun, roses climbing along the fence, bees humming their gentle symphony. You feel the soil warm under your bare feet, the sun on your back, the laughter drifting from the kitchen window. As dusk creeps in, the trench becomes a world of shadows and whispers. Someone starts humming an old folk tune, and others join in, each voice cautious at first, then stronger, weaving together a tender, ragged chorus. You join too, your voice low, carrying the weight of lost friends, broken letters, silent farewells. The sound floats up into the evening, mingling with the stars just beginning to blink awake above you. You hold the crust of bread close once more. You press it to your lips, breathing deeply, imagining the warmth of a fresh loaf, the softness of butter melting into each bite. In that moment, you are home, if only for a heartbeat. Tonight you lie back against the trench wall, the sky stretching above like a great, dark ocean. You whisper good night to the stars, to the friend who dreamed of bread, to the boy with the jam, to every name carried away on the smoke and the mud. As your eyelids grow heavy, you feel the crust of bread warm in your palm, the soft echo of song still humming in your chest. Sleep now. Let the garden hold you. Let the kitchen light guide you home. Beyond the mud, beyond the wire, there is still bread to break and songs to sing.
You wake to a soft drizzle falling into the trench, each droplet tapping the mud like gentle fingers on a worn piano. You blink slowly, the crust of bread still cradled in your hands, as if it had guarded you through the night. Around you, men stir quietly, their movements careful, each face a pale map of exhaustion and loss. The drizzle soaks into everything, your coat, your hair, the bandages on a nearby man's leg. You pull your collar up, but the wet finds its way in anyway, settling into your bones. This morning's task is ration duty. You help carry crates of bully beef and boxes of stale biscuits from the supply trench, each step sinking you deeper into the slush. The crates are slick, the wood swollen and splintering from endless rain. You haul them on aching shoulders, your breath turning to fog in the damp air. When you return, you see a small group gathered around a small tin pot, warming a thin, pale stew. A man stirs it slowly with a bayonet.
each swirl releasing a smell that's part meat, part mud. You take your share, lifting the tin mug to your lips and let the warmth spill into your hollow stomach. Across from you, a soldier pulls out a harmonica. His fingers hover, hesitant, before he finally presses it to his chapped lips. A soft, wavering melody floats out, fragile like a moth flickering in candlelight. The tune weaves through the trench, gathering quiet attention, the sound more comforting than any blanket. You close your eyes and imagine the harmonica in a sunlit field, the same tune rising above tall grass, a dog barking in the distance. For a moment, you almost forget the mud under your boots, the lice in your seams, the cold that gnaws at your marrow.
When the music stops, a young man beside you offers a small smile, one corner of his mouth twitching like it had forgotten how to move. You nod back, that tiny gesture feeling larger than any speech. The afternoon brings orders to reinforce the parapets. You stack sandbags, each one heavy with wet earth. Your hands slip, your shoulders scream with every lift. The sandbags split easily, spilling clumps of dark mud that splash against your boots and face. Near you, a man mutters curses with each bag, his voice rising and falling like a chant. Another sings an old marching song under his breath, each verse trailing off into sighs. You all work together, each movement in silent rhythm, driven by duty and the fragile thread of survival. When you pause, you catch sight of the crust of bread peeking from your pocket. You touch it lightly, a grounding anchor amid the endless gray. You remember the boy's laughter, the smell of imagined ovens, the warmth of hands shaping dough in a quiet kitchen.
As the sky shifts to dusk, you finish the last of the sandbags and sink down onto a wooden crate. A sergeant passes out small tots of rum, a rare, golden mercy. You tilt yours back, feeling it burn a path down your throat, a sudden fire in the cold night. Afterwards, a soldier starts to recite a poem. His voice cracks, rough as gravel, but he pushes on. Each word feels like a drop of honey in a world of ash. You let the lines wrap around you, filling the cracks in your heart that the mud and rain have carved. When he finishes, there is a hush. Then, softly, someone begins to clap, and others join in, their palms meeting slowly, the sound gentle, almost reverent. You take out the crust of bread, breaking off a tiny piece. You place it in your mouth and close your eyes, imagining the sweet warmth of butter melting across it, the crisp crackle of a fresh loaf. You see your mother's face as she slides bread from the oven, her smile wide and bright, her hands dusted with flour. Tonight, as the trench slips into uneasy silence, you lean back and let the rum settle in your veins, a fleeting warmth against the night's cold teeth. You whispered to the crust in your hand, a promise that you will carry it home, that you will remember every soul who once shared this mud-soaked purgatory. Above, the stars tremble behind drifting clouds, a silent audience to all the whispered prayers below. You feel each breath slow, each heartbeat a drum echoing a distant, peaceful morning that must surely come. Sleep now, wrapped in music, in memory, in the soft warmth of a loaf waiting somewhere beyond the mud. The morning fog rolls in thick and silent, wrapping the trench in a heavy, ghostly hush. You wake slowly, feeling the crust of bread still in your grasp, as if it had kept watch for you through the night. You stretch your arms, the stiffness creeping from your shoulders down to your fingertips, each joint a small protest against another day. A distant shell echoes across the fields, a low, drawn-out groan that shivers down your spine. You feel it in your teeth, in the soles of your feet, as if the earth itself is sighing beneath you. Breakfast, if it can be called that, is a piece of hard biscuit and a cup of tepid tea, its surface filmed with a thin layer of grease. You nibble it carefully, each bite a small defiance against the hunger that has become as constant as your own heartbeat. A letter arrives, not for you, but for the man next to you, a quiet, kind-eyed soul who used to talk about working in a library, about books and dusty pages, and the soft hush of turning paper. You watch as his hands tremble, the letter held like something holy. His lips move as he reads, silently sounding out each word as if tasting them. When he finishes, he presses the paper to his forehead, closes his eyes, and for a moment looks as if he might disappear into the memory of home. Orders come soon after. A repair party to fix a collapsed section of trench. You pull on your helmet and sling your shovel over your shoulder. The mud grips your boots with every step, pulling at you as if it wants you to stay buried with the ghosts of last night's dreams.
You dig alongside the librarian, each of you moving in rhythm. The mud slides away reluctantly, thick and heavy, clinging to your arms and splattering your face. You stop occasionally to wipe the grime from your eyes, smearing it across your cheeks like war paint. At one point, he starts telling you about the library again, about rows of books that smell like rain, about a favorite corner chair where sunlight spills across worn pages. You listen closely, the sound of his voice like a gentle fire on a cold night. You imagine it, the warmth, the hush, the scent of ink and old paper. It feels impossibly far away and yet vividly close, almost as if you could reach out and turn the pages yourself. When the repair is finished, you sit together on the trench edge, boots dangling above the muck. You share a small tin of jam, passing it back and forth, each spoonful a silent communion. You close your eyes with each taste, letting it carry you momentarily beyond the wire, beyond the mud, into kitchens and gardens where bees hum lazily and mothers call children in for supper.
As dusk rolls in, the sky turns a bruised purple, the first stars hesitating at the edges. The librarian pulls out a tiny, battered book from his pocket. Poetry, its pages soft and curling at the corners. He begins to read aloud, his voice low and shaky at first, then growing steady as the lines weave their way into the air. You listen, the words floating around you like drifting feathers. The men nearby fall silent, their heads bowed, as though the verses were a prayer, each syllable a small lifeline thrown into the dark. When he finishes, you find yourself holding the crust of bread tighter than before. You press it to your lips, feeling it pulse with the warmth of all the hands that had shared it in dreams. The baker, the boy with the jam, the librarian with his books. Night deepens, folding the trench into a soft, dangerous quiet. You lean back, letting your head rest against the rough boards. You watch the stars, now braver and brighter above you, pinpricks of distant, impossible light. You whisper goodnight to them, to the voices echoing in your mind, to the garden paths and the library corners and the warm kitchens waiting beyond the mud. As your eyes slip closed, the crust of bread rests gently against your heart, a final, fragile promise that you will carry these stories home. Sleep now, gentle dreamer. Let the books open for you, the bread rise in warm ovens, the stars guide you safely beyond the wire.
Morning drifts in almost shyly, as if afraid to disturb the fragile hush that has settled over the trench. You blink yourself awake, feeling the ache in your spine and the crust of bread still tucked safely to your chest. You give it a gentle squeeze, a silent greeting to the day. The air is sharp and damp, each breath a little knife against your throat. A thin mist curls through the trench like a pale ghost, hiding shapes and turning each movement into a careful dance. Breakfast today is even smaller than usual, a piece of biscuit so stale it could crack a tooth, and a smear of jam so thin you can see the tin's bottom glinting through. You eat it slowly, each bite a small rebellion against the hunger gnawing at your ribs. A man nearby offers you a sip of tea from his dented mug. It's bitter and lukewarm, but you nod gratefully, letting the liquid coat your mouth, imagining it as strong, dark, and steaming, poured from your mother's favorite blue kettle. A corporal passes by, barking orders in a voice that sounds as tired as the rest of you look. Today's task? Clear a section of trench choked with debris from the last shelling. You shoulder your shovel, its wooden handle worn smooth from so many trembling hands, and move forward. As you work, you find scraps of lives buried under the mud, a broken comb, a small mirror cracked in a spiderweb pattern, a button shaped like a tiny flower. You line them up carefully on the trench ledge, each one a fragment of someone's vanished warmth.
Nearby, the librarian from yesterday moves silently, gathering the pieces with delicate hands as if he were arranging rare books on a shelf. He pauses to show you a scrap of paper with a single word scrawled on it. Home. You look at it together, the word heavier than any shell, brighter than any flare. In the afternoon, you take a break, sitting on an overturned crate. A medic passes by, offering each man a small lump of chocolate, a treasure beyond imagination. You take it gently, holding it in your palm for a moment before placing it on your tongue. It melts slowly, a small, rich miracle that brings a sudden flood of memories. Holidays by the fire, the smell of cinnamon and pine, your sister laughing as she sneaks another piece from the kitchen table. Later, the librarian sits beside you, pulling out his tiny poetry book again. This time he hands it to you. Your fingers hesitate, trembling slightly before you open it. You read aloud, your voice rough and uneven, each word shaking free a piece of yourself you thought the mud had swallowed. The men gather closer, their breaths clouding in the cold dusk air, their faces softening as they listen. In that fragile circle for a few precious minutes, you are not soldiers. You are sons, brothers, dreamers clutching at the warmth of words and the flicker of stars above. As darkness deepens, the trench settles into uneasy sleep. A man hums softly, a thin thread of sound weaving through the fog. Someone whispers a prayer. Another man cradles a small photograph under his chin, as if it might keep him warm.
You sit with the crust of bread resting on your knee, your fingers tracing its rough edges like rosary beads. You close your eyes and see the baker's hands shaping dough, the librarian's face bent over a dusty page, the boy with the jam smiling shyly. You carry them all in this small, stubborn fragment of home. Above, the stars break through the mist one by one, each a tiny promise that somewhere beyond the mud and wire, light still lives. You tilt your head back, whispering each name you remember into the sky, sending them out like quiet lanterns into the dark. Tonight,
As your eyelids grow heavy, you press the crust of bread to your lips one last time. You imagine the taste of warm butter, the sound of a kettle singing, the feel of sunlight on your cheek. You let it all carry you into a gentler dream, one where the mud falls away and the air smells of lilacs and fresh bread. Sleep now, my dear friend. May you walk garden paths in your dreams tonight. May you hear every soft, waiting voice calling you home.
Morning rises one last time in the trench, as gentle and thin as a sigh. You open your eyes slowly, as though part of you already knows this dawn feels different. You stretch, feeling every crack and ache, the crust of bread still resting against your chest, now more talisman than food. Around you, men move quietly, their steps soft, their eyes distant. The air is heavy with a waiting hush, as if the world itself is holding its breath. A faint wind drifts through, carrying the cold scent of wet earth and rusted metal. Breakfast arrives in silence. A heel of bread, a sip of tea that tastes of tin and smoke. You chew it slowly, imagining the sweetness of honey, the warmth of a kitchen hearth, your mother's gentle humming as she kneads dough on a wooden table. Orders come. Prepare for one final push forward. The words land like stones in the mud. You feel them echo in your bones, see them ripple down the line. Men staring into nothing, hands trembling as they check their rifles. Some murmur quiet prayers, others simply sit with their heads bowed. You hold the crust of bread tightly in your palm, feeling its weight, its warmth. You tuck it safely into your pocket, closer than your own heartbeat. As the hour nears, you share one last moment with the librarian. He passes you his small poetry book, its pages soft and stained from damp hands and muddy pockets. You hesitate, then slip it into your coat, nodding at him with a silent promise. I will carry this too. When the whistle finally blows, you climb the ladder with legs that feel as though they belong to someone else. You move over the edge, into the gray, torn expanse of no man's land. The mud clutches at your boots, the air shivers with gunfire, and the world fractures into noise and light and pain. You press forward, each breath sharp as broken glass. Around you, figures stumble and fall, shapes collapse into the mud, voices rise and vanish in the fog. You grip your rifle, but in your mind you hold something much more delicate, a crust of bread, a thin book of poetry, 1,000 whispered dreams. Somewhere in the chaos you slip. You feel the earth swallow you, the mud seeping into every seam. You lie there, chest heaving, eyes staring up at a sky the color of ashes. In those long moments, time stretches and slows, like honey sliding from a spoon. You see a garden gate swinging open, your mother's arms outstretched, your sister's laughter tumbling down the path. You smell lilacs and warm bread, hear the kettle whistle, feel the softness of a dog's fur against your leg. Your hand finds the crust of bread, and you press it to your lips, tasting every memory it carries, every voice, every warmth, every moment of home.
Above, the clouds part, and for a breath, the sun spills across the field, turning the mud into gold, the wire into lace, the bodies into sleeping figures in a quiet meadow. You close your eyes. You let the warmth flood through you, deeper than any wound, brighter than any flare. And for that final, eternal instant, you are not in a trench. You are not in mud. You are not a soldier. You are simply home. And now, my dear listener, the trench has fallen silent. The song has ended, but the echo lingers in the heart.
Tonight, as you lie beneath your soft blanket, let your breath come easily. Let the warmth of your bed remind you of all that is gentle and good. And remember, every loaf of bread, every library book, every quiet sunrise is a miracle won by those who carried these memories through the mud for us. Good night. Sleep well. May your dreams carry you to gardens full of lilacs, kitchens filled with warm bread, and voices that call you home.